Welcome to our session on World FM Day. It's session 4 and the title is BYO BMS, the opportunity and challenge to the future of building management and CAFM systems by Ryan Darnell. There will be a Q&A portion at the end of the session. Please, if you have any questions, type it on the question area of your panel. Recordings and the presentation will be available within a few days via YouTube and FMCC-workplace.com. FMCC highly appreciates participation. Here is the vision and mission statement, and we are highly interested to be the main force and voice of FM consultants around the globe. FMCC is supplying different services as Ask the Expert, Find a Consultant, Locate a Speaker, and has also available some online educational resources as, for example, this session on World FM Day. Moreover, we want to thank our sponsors, ISS, Greg Morgan, Daikin, GFMA, and ISR1AG. Today we are within the World FM Week. World FM Day will be on May 17th, and we are highly appreciated to be able to have a 3-day event over the next 3 days. We have around about 30 to 35 sessions around the world, and we have been able to find more than 30 professionals for this event. Here you have a short cut of all the presenters, and now it's your floor, Ryan. Thanks for presenting today.
Thank you very much. I won't talk about myself too much, but what I will say is I'm originally an Australian facilities manager that has come out to the United Arab Emirates and the GCC or Middle East area for the last coming up to 10 years now. And some of the clients I've worked with, I've worked obviously for Jones Lang LaSalle, but for a number of companies also in the Gulf region. So if we go to the next slide, we'll get straight into it. So today, the learning objectives and what I want to talk about is I want to talk about the present trends in building automated systems and also the building management systems and how that ties into our CAFM or computer-aided facilities management systems. But more importantly, what I want to talk about is I want to identify some of the limitations of the current architecture and how that's affecting the facility management industry. Whether outside trends such as the Internet of Things, BIM, and just the overall IT innovation environment is maybe getting ahead of FM and we're not keeping pace. And what I want to talk about then is highlighting future trends and start to hypothesize about what some of those trends would be to succeed and what implications would be for FMs. And today is all about getting you as FM practitioners to think about that a little bit more and see if we can potentially innovate a lot more than what we are now. Okay, next slide. So today's food for thought, I call it, was I wanted to ask questions. Are building management systems keeping pace with global technology trends? And we're going to talk about some of the trends happening in the consumer market and some of those that are starting to impact the built environment and to see whether truly our BMS systems are keeping pace. Is the current architecture actually prohibiting the acceleration or innovation in the BMS sphere? So the closed environment, closed protocol and systems and communication processes, is that actually having an adverse effect on the rate of innovation? What other limitations are occurring in BMS and CAFM systems that maybe are slowing us down with the pace? How do trends in the workplace such as cloud computing, home automation, BIM, I've mentioned, Internet of Things, how's that affecting BMS now, and how will it affect BMS going forward? With current trends already occurring with bringing your own hardware to workplaces, and we see this now, there was a big, I know, pushback from IT in a lot of companies when people wanted to bring their own devices, and now that's a mainstay in the workplace. So is that starting to happen now with the BMS environment, whether it be with the integration of apps and control systems? So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. And most importantly, with the total building automation and controls market expected to almost reach 50 billion by next year, what is the future for BMS? Can it evolve, and can it keep pace with technology trends in the market? Next slide. So I just want to talk briefly about traditional BMS architecture with which most of the FM world will be aware of. BMSs are typically monitored and are controlled via on-site in many cases and also remotely, but I know in this part of the world there's traditionally still a BMS operator there. If there's not, then that BMS data is being looked at retroactively as well. As I said, some systems operate remotely. Traditionally, the software server database, however, we're now seeing some movement to cloud, but however, that's very slow. Sensors are used to monitor and control predominantly MEP assets. The leading providers are typically your likes of Siemens, Honeywell, Schneider, Cisco Systems, Johnson Controls, and Simca here especially. And most of those companies are using proprietary protocols such as examples CBus, Lonmark, BACnet, even more so, and Modbus. But what we're seeing traditionally is there's not many BMSs here that are controlling all the areas, and if they are in the Middle East, they're only really being used to monitor and not control. So some of the examples here that I've given in the photo, such as the fire systems, are typically controlled by one system monitored on the total BMS. CCTV is usually on a different system, so there are still a number of systems operating their own areas. Next slide, please. So the current environment for BMS that we see operating the market is mostly occurring in new builds due to the high cost and long return investment. So to install a BMS on a current building, the return investment is, sometimes 10 plus years when you're looking even on sustainability and control side. So most landlords, most companies that have long lease periods are not looking at that as options. The market is dominated by the larger players who, as I said, they use a closed system and protocol. However, there is a trend now for more of an open and standardizing protocol, which is starting to occur with protocols such as BACnet and others. Mostly the BMS systems are still hardwired systems, and many are still monitored and controlled on site. As I said, this really is going against the trend in the market, which is now machine learning and using the system to do more of automation. We're still relying a lot on people there. Monitoring, controlling, scheduling, and control parameters are set, such as set point configuration. So again, a lot of that has to be changed. There are systems that will schedule that for seasonal changes, but we're still relying on the human factor too much. Most of the BMS systems in this part of the region are still not linked to CAFM systems, so your chillers are not spitting out work orders for your technicians to come and do works on them if they go above a threshold. Most BMSs are still expensive to alter, upgrade, replace parts, or expand. We've seen that a lot, especially on the upgrade side. And one thing that we actually recommend developers or constructors here is to actually include at least 5 years of maintenance as part of their purchase of a BMS system, because when an FM provider comes in afterwards to try and negotiate a maintenance agreement, or an AMC as part of that, usually very, very price prohibitive. Most data analysis is retrospective, so what we mean by that is we're looking at lagging data, the data that comes out of the system, to make calculations or to make decisions, which occurs quite often. We're not actually looking for data a lot with BMS still. Most of the systems are proprietary, which means that as I said, the maintenance agreements are expensive. Many BMS still have operators, as I said, and there's a focus on optimization and energy reductions as part of the BMS, more so even than a life cycle analysis of the assets. Next slide, please. So some questions here. I mean, are our BMS systems, building management system, keeping pace with current technology trends? We're seeing a changing nature in the environment, going away from physical servers to now cloud-based computing. I've seen a lot of CAFM systems now doing that as well, which is interesting to see how that changes the dynamics. The blurring specifications on personal computers, tablets, and phones. You know, everyone thought phones would get smaller. Now, you know, looking at the screen size, and phones are getting bigger. Likewise, there's a blurring of the boundaries of tablets, and now most professionals that we work with don't have a desktop; they have a laptop, and many of those laptops are even turning into tablet form. The Internet of Things is becoming more prevalent in devices from manufacturers. So we're seeing, you know, whether it be from fridges to other devices now having their own IoT standard. They're talking to the manufacturer. They're telling it when there's some issue with it. They may be even doing things like tying in with apps or digital assistants. Apps for everything. That's a trend in the market at the moment. You can get an app from everything from in some buildings now even controlling the air conditioning right through to, you know, liaising with your building's concierge. New technology for traditional devices such as what I mentioned here, the Nest thermostat. So what some users are actually doing now in the residential sphere, they've got old thermostats, they're actually tying in now to these Nest thermostats, wiring them in, and then that ties into something like Google Home automation system. And again, it's not an expensive upgrade for the user to do. Home automation is becoming increasingly cheaper. So prior we had a C-bus system, so now a lot of people are using Apple, Amazon's Alexa, and Google Home. And what's that doing is it's really tying in a digital system with a number of different devices, which we'll talk about later. On-demand services are increasing every day. You only have to look at things like Uber, Airbnb, of all on-demand services. Virtual reality and augmented reality is being used more heavily. I was in a university a few months ago where they were using VR to actually look at 4D or 5D CAD drawings, walking through buildings. It was quite interesting to see. Artificial intelligence and more importantly machine intelligence or machine learning is becoming more prevalent with things like the algorithms are being updated now and improved on by the machines. Cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin and blockchain are also happening as well worldwide, and that's playing an effect on the market as well. Next slide. We're seeing more flexible work environments also. Gone are the days where 100% of your commercial office would have workstations. We encourage obviously people to be now more flexible, and we have our workspaces to do that. And you know, some of the leading practitioners now I talk to that go into companies, the first thing they do is actually look at how much time are you sitting down and physically needing to be at a workstation. And I think anywhere between 10 and 30% of that time is there, and the rest of that could be in cafes, meetings, flexible communication areas. So the workspace is really rapidly changing, and so too is FM technology got to keep pace with that. We're seeing increases in the environmental regulation and reporting. I know that when I worked in Australia, I think any one time we'd have about 5 or 6 different reporting methods we'd have to do on sustainability or data. That could be municipalities, could be Dow Jones Sustainability Index. There's a number of different regulations that we had to adhere to. Indoor air quality, really, and the users are having an increased focus on fresh air intake. You know, everyone is really looking at this at the moment. I know even in this part of the world, they want more fresh air. Obviously, we have some difficulty with that when the outside temperature is 45, 50 degrees in some areas. So we'll talk a little bit how that happens with technology as well. The BIM, or the Building Information Modeling System, is now mandatory in many countries, and what that's doing now, and we're looking at the FM world, is what data is actually coming across that we didn't have access to before, and how we will continue to manage that data going forward in the built environment. On-demand services, which we've talked about, there's an increase in security focus continually. We only have to look at the incidents that happen around the world, and especially that happen in this part of the world as well, but there is a huge focus on security at the moment. Automation of activities and driving further efficiencies. So again, looking at machine learning, getting away from operators, and really not just automating the systems, but using that automated data that comes back for the machine to actually do things different each time. We're seeing a huge advent of the smart cities. Dubai has announced a number of initiatives for smart cities, and my concern now is that's happening in the new developments, but how do we tie in the older buildings? So we need to look at smart buildings to match those smart cities. The merging of technology infrastructure such as Li-Fi, so pushing data and LED together through the same cabling, which is happening in some developments at the moment, which is really interesting. And the ever-expanding role of FM practitioners growing every day and what we look after. Next slide. So what's currently inhibiting the BMS advancement? As I said before, I think a major player on this is the cost. The cost can be still very high and a large investment's required. That scares off a lot of companies to do that. In this part of the world, the rents, the leases for space are still anywhere from 1 to 3 years, so that ROI is certainly not going to happen, and landlords are still, with the fluctuations in the market, not prepared to invest long term. The large players are still very reluctant to provide open standard protocols that are interoperable and not proprietary, and we'll talk about some case studies shortly about how that can be done differently. We're still seeing BMS and CAFM systems are still not linked, and really now we're looking at, well, will BIM change that? Because of the data coming across from BIM at the handover that's got to be maintained, will it actually push us now to link that BIM data and CAFM system together, and hopefully with BMS. Security, many organizations are still requesting locally hosted and hardwired BMS and stored servers. So again, very, very difficult to get clients to start to move towards the cloud. Privacy of data is a huge issue. We've seen many data breaches across a number of companies. So again, when you move to cloud, when you move to non-hardwired, do we have issues with security breaches? And control of the systems, something that we, predominantly in the FM world, FMs will control the BMS. And what we're looking at now is a work environment where moving towards the user is starting to control some elements of the BMS. Next slide, please. So just want to talk about a couple of examples here on some technologies that really rapidly changed and why. So just an example here, you'll see Android. So Android started as an open source project, which had 30+ companies involved. That was called the Open Handset Alliance, companies such as Samsung, HTC. And what they did is they actually took the Linux system and had it open sourced and had a number of developers come in and get to the stage where it is Android today. Now, Android is actually, despite what people think it is, a closed protocol today, but or closed source, but initially it was open to allow it to change quickly, and that allowed it to catch up, I believe, to Apple's operating system fairly quickly through that innovative method, which is great to see. Next slide, please. Some other companies that are also encouraging users to hack their system, I guess, is companies like Microsoft. So Microsoft will use or will have prize money for people to come in and find breaches of their software. They offer prize money for that to find bugs or whatever it might be. Other companies, and I see this especially in the crowdsourced environment, they're actually having open sessions where they encourage coders or hackers to come in and not just bust open their system, but also look at efficiencies, innovation in their system as well, and they're offering them whether it be equity, whether it be prizes to be part of that. So the collaborative model is happening a lot more in the IT sphere, and it's something that in the FM or the BMS area we're really not seeing, and I think that's really a shame, because I know a lot of FM practitioners and users of BMS systems would be extremely good in looking at the changes to the building management systems. Next slide, please. So one thing I want to talk about here is how home automation is gaining traction. Whether it be Google, Android, Apple, they're really only acting as an intelligent digital assistant, and I think this is something that we'll actually see grow. But acting as that overlay, and then having all the different devices report into them, so to say, is really changing the way that we do home automation, and allowing the end user to be more in control and actually do this themselves, rather than have to have the expensive outlay of providing a full building automated system in their house. So you see some examples here. We've got Nest thermostats. We've got Philips now also is able to talk to Google. Belkin have measurements for their GPOs. There's everything from door systems, CCTV, even your Apple phone or Android phone, lock systems, and we're seeing this grow each day. And even Honeywell, I've seen, have now signed on with Google to be part of that system. So this is again really interesting, because many of the environments that we look after in the FM world are residential or mixed use with commercial and retail. And now with a lot of residents actually wanting to bring their own items to the built environment, will that be able to interact with the BMS? And that's where I think things are going to get really interesting. Next slide, please. So as I said, we're seeing more and more devices come into that digital assistant sphere. As I said, I've seen a number of fridges now that have IoT capability. Again, in my home, I've got my air conditionings on one system. I've got my Tesla batteries and solar on one system with inverters. The real benefit for me is going to be when those systems have, respond into that overlay, that intelligent digital assistant, which is able to make decisions and learn from that. So at the moment, they're standalone systems or standalone apps, but when they actually start talking to each other, excuse me, when the fridge knows that the Tesla battery is getting low and everyone's asleep, it starts to slow down its power usage or whatever it might be, or it knows that when it's daytime and there is sufficient battery storage, that it doesn't need to go into low power mode, because it is going to be open and closed quite often. This is where the real interest for me is tying in all those systems, and it's starting to happen now, which is exciting. Next slide, please. So, how is this going to roll over into the office environment, where traditionally, as I said, we have the closed architecture of the BMS system. Smarter offices require smarter systems to manage them. And the photo you'll see here is actually Dubai's first 3D printed office, and it's actually a working office. Many meetings are held there, and now what they've actually done is they've started an innovation area or zone to test out these new technologies with BMS, and they have some huge companies in there now working on that, which is very exciting. Next slide, please. So what is the BMS's potential? And this is where, again, I want to put out some food for thought for FM practitioners. So the facility managers really need to push the BMS companies to provide open standard protocols that are interoperable and not proprietary. And whether that be in a testing environment, or whether that be having a hack sphere where people go in and test those systems, I think we really need to open that environment a little bit more to be innovative. Allow more systems to communicate with each other instead of trying to be the one system for all. As I said, in the BMS environment, still the BMS traditionally will only monitor set points from fire system CCTV. It won't actually interact with those because of the closed protocol systems. We really need to seek white hats to identify bugs and flaws with the systems before we go live. As I said, opening that environment for people to go in and innovate with that system. And looking at things more in a smart way, so actually allowing more users to control their environment within the parameters. And an example of that is the Edge building in Amsterdam, which was I'm quite excited to read about, where users will have an app and they can actually go in and change certain dynamics of their work environment. And I think actually in the latest app update, they're talking now about instead of changing the environment to suit the person, because of the flexibility of that work environment, people can come in the workspace and actually say, okay, I like my workspace to be colder or warmer, and they can put that in the app, put what set points they prefer, and the app will actually tell them, go and sit in this area, which I think is really smart, because in the FM environment, the two biggest complaints we get are too hot or too cold. And sometimes, yes, you can change those things with the airflow coming from the AC register, with the temperature, the chill temperature coming from the air conditioning units, but ultimately, with radiant heat, with light, you'll never be able to make everyone happy, and everyone's thermodynamics are different, especially between genders. So actually, allowing people to see the temperature where they want to go to is quite interesting. Automation of systems, automation of services, needs to play into the systems as well. Machine learning, as I said, really is exciting for me, and focusing on the system to make decisions based on data points, moving away from the manual operator more to an automated system. Internet of Things for devices and linking to the BMS to provide further information. So actually having, your fridges speak to the BMS and to say, we may have a water leak, or we may have an issue with the water coming in. Maybe the filtration system is not working. That hasn't been picked up in another area. So that for me is really exciting when the devices start talking to each other and making decisions based on that. Constant evolution instead of costly upgrades. This is actually something that we've done in KIDMA, where I work at the moment, where we've done one system for all. We're using SAP across the whole sphere, but now we're getting to the realization that we do need those overlays, we do need those other systems to tie in, and instead of the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 upgrades, you do need constant upgrades. And something that I remember when I spoke to Guy Kawasaki about, he used to say, with the Apple products, the iPhone, they'd only get it to 94, 95%, and then they'd release the upgrade. He said if all they ever did was try and get to 100% every time, they never would have released a phone. So that constant innovation is important. Assets making predictive decisions as well. So, chillers, actually, looking at your predictive maintenance, whether it be on vibration analysis, oil analysis, that's going to be quite interesting. Dashboard driving decision making, ensuring FMs continue to become more strategic. So most FM practitioners now, we all have dashboards, but again, we're still relying heavily on manual processes and decisions to be made from that analysis. What we're trying to get now is to actually start looking at the machines making decisions based on that as well. Next slide, please. So one of the questions I want to throw out for everyone there, hopefully that's viewing the presentation now, and feel free to send me a tweet or talk with your colleagues, is do you really believe that building management systems are keeping pace with facilities management and technological demands? Am I off track? Am I totally wrong? Or do you feel like this is a thing that, in the FM world, our systems, whether it be BMS, CAFM, are not keeping pace with what's happening in the consumer market or other areas of IT? That's one thing that I definitely believe in, but I'm very keen to hear back from you also. Next slide, please. So if you want to get in contact with me, as I said, I'm the Executive Director for KIDMA at the moment, which we're a Middle Eastern facilities management or property solutions company based in Abu Dhabi, but feel free to send me a message on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it might be, and tell me, am I totally wrong? Am I on the right track? And also, what are your experiences with the IT elements within FM and how you see that changing and evolving over the coming future? But thank you very much for everyone for participating. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. If you have any question, please type them into the question box. While we are waiting, Ryan, I have some question. How high is the percentage of BMS of BIM systems in the Middle East at the moment?
We're still not seeing a lot of the BIMs come through to operational yet. There are a lot of projects that are using BIM at the moment. It is something that's required now by the local authorities. But a lot of those projects are still maybe only in the second or third year of construction, still have not come through to handover. So as far as from the FM side, we're not highly optimistic yet until we see what's coming through, because typically in this part of the world, the handover documentation and data that's required is extremely poor. You know, very lucky if we get all the operating and maintenance manuals, very lucky if we get all the asset data. You know, we've really got to go usually hunting for that sort of stuff. And then, yeah, also on the BMS side, we typically get a system that has a number of defects handed over and maybe was designed for a system requirements 5 or 10 years ago, but not the requirements as part of handover. But that's something in the FM world we're trying to change. A number of FMs, including Kidma, were involved now in giving advice during the design stage or even as far back as concept stage. So those developers that are trying to be different are now you know, listening to FMs and adapting their buildings to suit, which is great.
What is in case of security? We all learned that about the attack we had some days ago in the UK. What do you think will happen in case of security in the near future? Because I think it's quite important to take it into consideration.
Yeah, we had an incident here actually in Abu Dhabi. In one of our sites we had a terrorist incident, and again we relied on our technology in a retroactive way. The police, using our CCTV cameras and our data, were able to find that person within 48 hours. However, a lot of things have changed out of that now. What we're seeing is not just the advent, obviously, of facial recognition and other systems, but the tying in of a building system to local authorities. So we have, I believe it's called Falcon Eye here in the UAE, which, you know, we have cameras everywhere, but those cameras in the buildings now are tying into the Ministry of Interior and the security cameras, which really, you know, adds, you know, things to a whole nother level, as I said. And the government is really, they're the ones now investing in that facial recognition or using that data. So again, I think that's, you know, throws up in a whole list of debates on privacy and that sort of thing, but that's the way things are moving here, where it's the government are going to control that back end of the systems, and we provide to their specifications the front end.
Okay. Thank you. I see we don't have any further questions at the moment, so thank you again for doing this presentation. I will go on with my part. We have some other sessions. The next session will be Ask the Experts Consultants Chat in approximately 1 hour. Then we have Olumide Aina from Nigeria, finding the sweet spot in facilities management. And then we will have a very interesting session about standards in FM from the UK and Australia by Dan Mitchell, Dave Wilson, and Stephen Berlisti. We also want to remind you and that FMCC has an app. The app can be downloaded in the different app stores for iPhone and Android, and the app will bring you some updates about FMCC. Moreover, I want to highlight, and especially since I have been STAG chair for 2 years, that we are always looking for volunteers. If you want to do a webinar, a white paper, or a podcast, or you want to act as a coordinator, supporter, or social media activist, please get in touch with Riccardo Grippaldi. His email is there. Also, you can get in touch with me. I also want to highlight the other council and communities. We are working together. We are doing events and presentations together, and the other councils are also happy if you would join them. So thanks for joining us. Thanks to Ryan. It was really a great presentation, very interesting, and that's you can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and the recording, as mentioned already, will be available on our YouTube channel very soon. Thanks, Ryan. Final words?
Thank you very much. No, thank you very much. Just happy World FM Day, and really encourage FM practitioners to look at the IT and innovation around them, and let's harness that for the FM world.
Thanks.